My name is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights, which is a podcast all about change, leadership, growth, development, innovation, and just kind of making waves in our space. And I'm so excited. I have here on the show with me, Kristen Olson. Yay!
Woo.
She is an entrepreneur. She is a podcast host and she's a public speaker. And right now, the conversation that she is having with teams and communities, it's all about small gestures, large leadership. She's got a talk called No Gold Stars. She really leans into this concept and really owns this concept of graceful disruption. And Kristen, you've been on the show before a long time ago. So I love that we're kind of back in this space together. That bio was very brief. Tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, the short answer is I have absolutely no idea. And that's really, it's
Truth.
funny, but also the
Truth.
truth. We've had to, navigate and just cling to, what's happening and keep showing up. But the quick details, I am the oldest of four, a lifelong athlete. I played Division I lacrosse. After that, I started a lacrosse company because I was a Colorado kid playing out east. And I wanted to further the sport that had provided so much for my world. It had taken me quite literally all over the world, Japan and Prague, and played. So we started a company, Colorado Rising Stars Lacrosse, and we did camps, tournaments, team sales. It's a wealthy white kid sport. It still pretty much is. They're working on their diversity and inclusion. But I wanted to figure out a way to allow opportunity and accessibility. Didn't really have this language back then, but for everyone to play this sport that had offered so much for my world. So we started just to navigate what is now creative relationships, creative sponsorships and partnerships. So reaching out to like companies like Cliff Bar, had them come in, sponsor us. We would give out Cliff Bars at like field days so we could teach all the kids at a school to field day. Cliff Bar normally couldn't get into schools, and we could come in there slightly healthier treat than popsicles, which field days are normally providing. And so it all kind of works. So fast forward, that initial company launched into a similar situation with CrossFit. They were kind of the same thing, wealthy white people lifting up weights and doing the same thing. Navigate the business space. And I was helping with that. So, 2015 KO Alliance, my marketing and branding consulting firm, was established. And 10 years later, we still do a lot in lacrosse and CrossFit branding, marketing. And then, with Instagram and everything taking off, we wanted to further that conversation around diversity and inclusion, accessibility, and the idea that seemingly opposing things can harmoniously coexist. Hence the name turmeric and tequila. It's a anti-inflammatory, inflammatory working together. And that space between that ampersand is the graceful disruption. So I'm excited to talk about that today. And, we do a lot with influencers. So it starts with us. We can talk about, gracefully disrupting our own narrative and then going to conquer the world.
Yeah. Well, let's start there then. What does it mean to gracefully disrupt your own narrative? Like, why do we need to start with ourselves?
Sure. Well, quite casually understanding what it is, it's really about challenging status quo. So coming from marketing and branding, we know that we're infiltrated with messages all the time. And now, with our cell phones, our young people have this on the daily. We didn't grow up with that. The reality is coming through this. So if reality is nothing more than applied meaning, marketing and branding professionals are really facilitating a lot of our reality. And this was a big reason I wanted to start the podcast and get good people saying good things, because being a professional in that space, I felt responsible to start telling the truth. And in health and wellness, there's a lot of gray areas. So I'm like, we don't need to go out there and fight the world and beat things down and this and that. Like, we just need to casually make intentional change. And influencer marketing is a big piece of our marketing. It's where, leaders model something, they influence. I would like to say they inspire you to do something. Well, you can't do that until you're authentically walking into it. Influencer marketing or inspiring marketing does not work unless you have the right people that are authentically walking in that truth. So if we want to go out there and facilitate positive change, aka graceful disruption, challenge status quo, question a better way, however you want to break it down, you got to live it and walk in it first. So that starts with checking in of, what's my daily talk with myself? What actions am I doing throughout the day to take care of myself? How do I feel about myself? If I'm doing a workout and I'm like, God, that was a terrible workout today. Okay, well, I'm here for transparency and the truth. Like, I'm a competitive athlete. Like, let's get down to business. Tell me what it is. We don't need fluffy high fives and stuff. And if I have a bad workout, does that mean I'm a bad athlete? No, I'm a great athlete with a bad day. Maybe I'm a great person with a bad day. And so even just checking in with that intentional personal narrative and saying, like, time out, let's be personally responsible for this, then go out and call out all the people around you that you think you need to disrupt or get onto big food and big pharma.
Yeah. And when you and I have talked about this in the past, there's such a great parallel with organizational change and leadership in the workplace. And we've actually talked about influencers in the organization and how those are the people that we want to follow because we're aligned with them living their truth. We're aligned with their values and what they believe in, and they're walking the walk. And I think, if I'm somebody who's in the workplace thinking about, well, how do I be more effective in my current role? How do I be more effective when I'm leading a team? What I'm hearing you say, that translation is you really have to start with the foundation of going within and asking those questions that you're asking, like, how am I feeling? How am I doing? And having that gut check, because if you're not feeling honest and truthful, connected to your higher self, then there's probably a good chance that the people around you, if they're going to see through that, and it's not going to make you as impactful, in whatever space you're playing. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And our young humans they exist in this space. So they're a conscious consumer, they're savvy, they understand, they know, they see through the smoke and mirrors way better than we do, way earlier than we did, because
Mm-hmm.
this is their everyday. So yes, change agents and change leaders and all these people, in the workplace with the formal titles are the exact same thing as influencers. And I would even say
Mm-hmm.
it happens before the influencer is even hired. Attitude reflects leadership. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
leadership, CEO, founder, creator, host, whatever, if they're not walking in it, you're not even going to hire or facilitate the right influencer to then implement, inspire, or facilitate any sort of positive change you actually want. So it really does start
Yeah.
with that top, and then it all filtrates down. So if you're in a space of leadership, which we really all are, people don't understand how
Yeah.
much we are taking in messages from t-shirts or branding or podcasts all the time. You got to check in and be like, okay, I see all this around me. What do I actually want? And then almost reverse engineer it to like your end game of your goal, particularly as a leader or a change agent. Now everyone's intentionally watching you. So if you're not walking in it and doing these things authentically, they're going to see right through it.
Which totally agree with you. I know it's harder than it sounds to actually do what you're saying because, if again, I'm thinking about the workplace and culture, and if the leaders at the top are saying one thing and then behaving in another way, which happens unfortunately all the time, that trickles down to the rest of the group or trickles across. And what I see with like the clients that I work with is that people adapt and adopt those types of behaviors versus, gracefully disrupt and go in a different direction. And I think I intellectually understand why that happens, but it almost seems like, especially now, there's almost a different importance around being a more responsible leader, more, and really pursuing that idea of small gestures, large influence or graceful disruption. I mean, if you were to fast forward 10 years, 20 years from now, what do you think the future of leadership looks like? Leadership in the workplace, leadership with our next, up and coming generation. What do
I
they
think
need?
yeah, I think they need to be themselves. And that's a tired
Yeah.
cliche because authenticity is a tired cliche. And so are influencers. The thing is, it's hard. The difference between being an influencer in the outside world and being in a corporate situation, it's got to start with authenticity. So if you can't buy in and believe, you need to get out. That's not your client. That's not your partner. It just doesn't work. And you don't need to force it.
Mhm.
There's millions of opportunities out there. Find the right space. That being said, in the corporate space, you have a job for 20 plus years and maybe there's new CEO or new leadership or plans or whatever, and you don't authentically identify, then my suggestion, and you have to obviously make money, pay the bills. My suggestion is change your perspective. And
Mhm.
this is what I think when you say, what will our future look like? This is what I think our young people are doing now. Number one, understand yourself. But a lot of people I work with do not like the word influencer. So I'm like, okay, well, if you don't
Mhm.
want to be an influencer, you're already a leader. So whatever you want to call it, let's call it that. So if leader is more, comfortable for or digestible for you, or inspire, that's fine. The way you label it doesn't really matter. So I encourage people to find a way of the core values, find something that you can identify with authentically, and then shift your perspective. If you maybe don't agree with all of it, find the one angle that you do and lean
Mhm.
heavy into that. Don't call me an influencer, call me an inspire. Okay, well, do my actions after that not change? Not really, but does my energy around it? Absolutely. So I think it's really critical that you have, again, that internal graceful disruption and perspective. Widen it or open it up to something else. Change something in your mind the way that it looks, because again, the end game and the actions you put forward are still going to create that pathway to your goal, but you need to have authentic energy around that pathway to authentically get there and get people to authentically want to get on the train with you. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And when you ask what are our future leaders going to look like, I think they're going to get that way earlier because they grew up with this stuff and they're not necessarily monetarily motivated the way our generation was. They don't want to take on debt as quickly. There's trade schools, there's all these, it's a deeper conversation, but I just think their values and their intentions with their time will be much different than what we're doing. So if you're not, being authentic and walking that authentic space, they're not going to buy in. They're just going to go on to the next thing. And they're not going to be as handcuffed as our generation is to, the huge house bill, the huge car bill, all these things. They'll just straight up walk away. So I think leadership in general will naturally filtrate out all the ones that learned it or Googled it or trying to be a leader because that's how they told it to be and it's not really what they want to do. And it just straight up won't work.
Yeah, I really hope you're right about that piece in particular around, they don't want to be tied down to debt or need the big house. Because I think about my own kids and how they watch a lot of, I don't know if they're influencers or just YouTubers or what, but they see that and they're like, oh, that's what I want to do. I'm like, oh, I'm like, well, Mr. Beast makes a ton of money. I get that, but also what? Wow. I can't relate.
Yeah, they grew up with it, but even then, we'll go dig into Mr. Beast. He has a full production team. It's an incredible business. I always say, people, if you want to be an influencer, go try it for a day, getting on your phone, having key messaging, really doing it right. It's a full-time job. I did hear a stat that was like the number one thing when kids are like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. Now it's I want to be an influencer, which totally cracks me up because I know we both walk in leadership roles and I'm on socials, probably more than you are. Actually, I definitely am. But
I'm on LinkedIn. Yay.
Yeah, but I can, being in the business side, I can disconnect. I don't take it that seriously. I'm very intentional with my time and energy, but I want you to see the raw versions of me lifting or working or doing a podcast. And it's practice. It's not only like a physical commitment, it's a mental health commitment. So it looks smoke and mirrors like glam right now, but give it time. I think if kids did it for a day, they'd be like, all right, I'm going to go to law school or I'm going to go do something else. Or honestly, I think we're going to see more entrepreneurs than ever where they're monetizing their passion. Maybe you're painting ceramic butterflies or something. I don't know. There's, with Etsy and TikTok shop and all these things popping off. The free market is out there. So I think we're not even ready for what's going to happen next in a good way.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I kind of like that. The fact that there's going to be things that we have no idea what to expect. I think, the conversation that's happening in a lot of organizations is how is AI going to influence and impact the way we work? And there's some fear around it. There's some excitement. There's a lot of confusion about how we're going to leverage that too. So I think what the future holds is going to look totally different than we've even, could be imagining it right now. And even for our kids, like what jobs they take on and, all of that. But kind of coming back around to this idea that I kind of picked up as you were talking about influence takes work. And I think it takes work not only to stay true and genuine and in that space of being authentic to yourself and not being swayed by, the influences around you that may not be in alignment with who you are and what you stand for. And it also takes work in an organization or outside of an organization. You're talking about social media influencers who are representing brands and ultimately selling products and services and ideas because there's something that they're doing that connects with the people that are watching them and following them. And then I think about how that applies in an organization. And unfortunately, there's still a bit of, not unfortunately, it's not a bad thing. It's just the reality of the workplace. There's, top-down leadership has been a thing for a really long time. And it's starting to diffuse with our younger generation with hybrid and remote working. Distributed leadership is a conversation that's come up and being able to influence not out of a position of authority, but of genuine influence is becoming even more important. And I actually think AI has a role here because some of the skills and capabilities that individuals had, they almost, I think it was like a license to behave and act in a certain way. Yeah. And with AI taking on some of those tasks like analytics, I mean, nothing against analytics, I love it, right? But it's going to require people that really lean into their human skills even more. And then there's not going to be as many excuses for bad behavior. So I guess long story short, I don't know where I was going with that thread. It was more of a free flowing
Go
thought
with
on
it.
that one.
Let's go.
But yeah, it is going to be interesting to see
Well,
how everything shakes out. But what were you going to say?
yeah, I think it is, but it's the cliche of like, what's the one thing you can't replicate? Like your own humanness, like your own
Right.
human authentic
Right.
authenticity of you being you. So it's kind of like this beach of death cliches where like coming of age and it's like just be yourself and you're like, okay, it takes time to figure that out. But the reality is, yes, the universe, God, Madonna, whatever you believe, is going through this big check of like any of this side BS where you just got away with doing the same thing for 50 years. Well, now a machine's replacing you. It learned it in 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
that's what it is. So just like what we tell our young people in coaching or in school or as athletes, make yourself irreplaceable. And if that's the only way to do that is be your authentic self, that's what it is. And if people aren't going to follow you, they're not going to follow you. And the way that you do establish those ethos and that credibility as a leader, there's no shortcut. It's reps. It's straight up reps. People aren't going to watch a lifter that lifts 5 pounds. They're watching a lifter that lifts 500 pounds. Well, it takes 15 years to get to 500 pounds. Like it takes all this time. Like you've got to walk in it. So how you walk in the room and present yourself and tout your resume is great. But people are watching now, thanks to social media and everything else, the way you walk out of the room. What are you doing at the grocery store? How do you treat your family? What are you doing with your kids on the weekend? Are you on Instagram with your dog? Are you doing like people see so much more? So you can no longer fake it and hide under the radar if you want to be in this leadership role. As an athlete, I constantly
Mhm.
talk about greatness is not casual. So you can go watch the highlight reel of Michael Jordan or Serena Williams or Caitlin Clark. You don't understand the hundreds of thousands of hours and reps it's taken to be there. And in addition, that's just the physical side. If you want to be a great leader, you need to speak well, read well, handle diversity well, handle inclusion well, handle adversity outside of the workplace well. I mean, there's so much to leadership that if you really want to be in that, you better start doing the work now, because regardless of what resume or chat GPT glitter you put on your life, the truth is going to prevail and it's going to walk, and only people are going to be inspired by someone already authentically doing what they want to be.
What if somebody hears that, like what you just described, though, and is like, "Oh gosh, that sounds exhausting. I'm just going to keep being a jerk." It's like
Then that
I'm just going to keep doing what I'm going to do. What sort of advice would you give that to that person who feels
uh,
overwhelmed by what you just described?
well, I'll tell you a real short answer. Go Google Puff Daddy and go see his journey, the one that ruled the world. I'm dead serious, and see how it's like a massive uprising of everything being called out. I mean, if you choose to live an inauthentic life, or you choose this path where you're just going to cut corners, at some point, you're going to God, Universe, Madonna will check you. But that's a whole different conversation than our intentional people showing up. Like maybe you don't need to be a leader at work. That's okay too. We need followers, I would say, on and off the field for my world, but in and out of the classroom for teachers, or in and out of the office for my corporate entrepreneur business humans. You need leaders and followers at all times. Again, seemingly opposing things can harmoniously coexist, and you can be both things. Maybe you're a leader at work and you are more of a follower in your home life, or vice versa. It's those things. So I think if you're at any point of overwhelm, it's almost like how we started this conversation. Take a step back and check in. Be like, what am I actually overwhelmed about? Is it because I think I'm a bad athlete, or did I have a bad day? Is my family too much, or is it just too much right now? I mean, it's really checking back in with that narrative of stepping back and then being honest, being like, you know what, maybe I don't want to go after this leadership role. Maybe I don't want to have another kid. Maybe I don't want to do some of these things, and calm the overwhelm before it really does take over everything, and get that clarity. I think though the first step in that, honestly, and we talk about this because I don't know that either one of us are great about this, but just take a step back and take a pause. I know that's
Yeah.
something I will continue to have to get better at.
Yeah. No, and that I think that what you're saying resonates. And I would like to think that everybody's a leader. I think you might have said that at the very beginning of the conversation, whether we realize it or not, someone is watching and you're a few steps down the road than they are. So at all times, you're in a place where somebody else wants to be. So I see that as like a leadership opportunity to live authentically and lead authentically. But so yes, if you rise to the top and you don't have that authentic, honest piece, then the cards will certainly fall. But what about kind of coming back to that original idea of small gestures? I may not want to be the CEO of my organization, but I do want to be the best version of myself. What are some small gestures that can have a big impact for me, more than just do that gut check? Like, what are some really intentional things I could do on a daily, weekly basis to really kind of start to have that really root into my ethos?
Yeah, I think the first conversation on leadership really always starts with your family, however that looks.
Hmm.
Maybe it's you with your 3 dogs or you with, 15 kids and 2 spouses, or I don't know. However it looks, I think that's really because so much of our world exists within, our home. So whatever the home life is,
Hmm.
I would check in there and say, what am I overwhelmed with? What do I care about? What are my core values? And then build that to like the rest of the world. So I think it's almost just taking a step in simplifying like what the end game is and what the goals are, and taking a step back in what you want, and then being conscious of your behavior within it. And I think a really good example of that's really simple, especially for my young women. You're an influencer, especially if you're a parent or a leader at the gym or a school teacher. How you talk about yourself. Like if you grew up and your mom or dad were always like, God, I want to lose weight. I always want to lose weight. I hate my thighs. I hate this. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it's like 60% of those kids that hear that narrative on the regular have some sort of disordered eating by the age of 18. So Google that if you're listening. That's not, but my point is the impact. So even that conversation of how you're speaking about yourself out loud is a significant first step. So just heighten your awareness, step one, on how you're talking to yourself and then how you're talking about yourself out loud, and have the awareness that that's going in around in your home. So if that's happening in your home, that's likely happening in your workplace, and you're going to attract other people with that similar narrative. Oh yeah, let's
Hmm.
get on a diet. Let's do this. Oh my God, I ate a burrito this weekend. I'm so mad at myself, blah, blah, blah. And this can be about, Jim, I made $1 million last year and I only made 500 this year. I'm a loser, da, da, da. So the kids and everyone around you are listening. So step one, I always think, is check in and then be aware of your internal and external monologue.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like maybe another way to put that is really getting clear on what matters most is step one, and prioritizing step two. Step three is check the conversation that you're having with yourself out loud. And I would even go as far to say, and I think this, whether you're at home or in the workplace, sometimes even more impactful um, statements, I'm using air quotes here, is what isn't said, right?
Yeah.
And it's those like unspoken values or unspoken ways of working or norms or home life, and those can be just as either detrimental or positively impactful. So really just taking like an inventory almost of the conversations that are happening inside, outside, and around you, and whether your behaviors are aligned with the best version of yourself, or if
Yeah.
they're aligned with the narrative that isn't a healthy narrative for you or for anybody around you.
Absolutely. Well, and I just want
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
piggyback on that, not to interrupt you. And that would apply directly to your business as a change leader or someone that's trying to change agent or anyone in the business space. Again, if you're walking around saying like, I hate the new water cooler or I hate the new, HR plan, whatever it is. And then you're like, oh, but everybody sign up. Let's do this. Well, they're not going to believe you. Like it's not authentic. It's there. And you're literally saying one thing and doing another. It's just not going to work. So these little like small gestures of like, mute the monologue, change your perspective, find how the water cooler can be beneficial. The new HR benefits are great, and lean into that. And that just those small things, like maybe not saying something or maybe being intentionally positive when you walk in the room, that is where you facilitate that opportunity for larger leadership.
Yeah. And what you're saying is walk the talk, right? And
Mhm.
and that's really, really important. I've worked for organizations, I've had clients. Actually, one company that I worked for, they rolled out this new set of core values, or a set of values that they wanted everyone to adopt. And it was, what you said, like it wasn't believable because the statements that were being made were not being reflected at the leadership level. It was like, make time for this, but we don't have time for this, right? And so that there's such a disconnect there, and that's what creates toxic cultures in the workplace, and that makes change and innovation really hard, and it creates toxic environments at home, like, don't do this, meanwhile I'm going to go do this. So I think it's just more than anything, a call to action for people to think about the responsibility they have to care for people, to do the right thing, to understand their potential and level of influence, and either use it for good or not. And maybe the using it for good is some of the graceful disruption that we need in this today's wild environment. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I think we're at, in general, a point of disruption across the board. We've got a big election coming up. We do have,
Mhm.
the Puff Daddies and Weinsteins and all these major industry leaders. A lot of truth is coming up into the air, regardless of what side you're
Mhm.
on. And the things are filtering out. And I think the largest overlooked situation with influencing and leadership and being a change agent and all these things is the mental health conversation. If you're living
Yeah.
inauthentically on the daily and trying to subscribe maybe to like these core values, something that don't align with you, at some point things are going to give way. And if not, and
Yep.
it's probably going to bring you down in the process. I know we've both been in those situations personally, and you learn, and sometimes it takes a couple times of like, if it's not working, it really doesn't align with you. The answer is that not the easy one, but it's, you need to get out. You need to find a space where you authentically live, because again, going back to the home, your priority hypothetically is the most important spot. So no matter how much money or success you're having out here in the workplace or out of the home, you're coming home miserable and living in a space that isn't authentically you. And nothing is
Mhm.
worth the mental health cost of that. And I know we can't quit our jobs tomorrow and make moves easily, but if you're sitting in a space where you feel that, you know, disgruntled energy and it just doesn't feel like a fit or it's out of alignment, you need to start planning on how to make a move and finding something that is within alignment. And then when you do that, then we can get to like the faith and universe of like things will provide once you're living in alignment. But it makes a difference because that negative that's coming from your paycheck is then now going into your home and into your personal world. And,
Mhm.
you're a change agent in a negative space. So I
Mhm.
think it really is, it's an awareness and a mental health conversation far before a business or a money income conversation.
Yeah, I have a feeling somebody out there listening needed to hear that message. And then, and funny enough, I'm actually, so I teach yoga, as you know, on the side. And one of the topics that or one of the lessons, just I guess ideas I was sharing with students was on this concept of satya, which means living your truth. And that when you live your truth, you are connected to your higher self. And when you are not living in your truth, then things sort of fall apart. And, gosh, just hearing you say that, like, it's, you got to figure it out. You got to disconnect from that and make a change. Somebody out there is in a job right now where they're like, this does not align and I can't do it anymore. And what you're saying is it's okay to make that change. It's okay to take that big leap. It's going to be better for you in the long run. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and you don't have to do that overnight because that's super overwhelming. And again, I know there's responsibility and we've got bills and things, mouths to feed and all the whole nine. But I think just initially opening your mind to change and seeking what you want to do, I do think God, Universe, Madonna has a funny way of planting opportunities in your path if you're open to them, if you're intentional about it, and you want to make a change. And if you really care about leadership or being successful or whatever your word for the next step is, or eternal greatness. You want to do that in a space from where you're purposeful, and that's living in
Mm-hmm.
alignment and using your gifts, using your authenticity. It's like using what's already there. I've talked about, I want to build a choir, which makes absolutely no sense in the world. No music,
Putting
but
it out there, though, putting it out
yeah, but we put it out there. We've had some intentional conversations, some funny opportunities that are fitting. So, however crazy or wild it is, I at first step just open up the doors and then see what happens. But be intentional about really wanting to live and walk in your truth. And I think, and that's where we facilitate our best leaders.
Yeah, message received. Well, I love this. Thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing your light, your energy, your authentic self with me, with the Change Leader Insights community. Where can people find you if they want to listen to you on your podcast, Turmeric and Tequila? How can they find you on the socials? What's all your handles? I don't even know what they're called.
Do you have 30 more minutes? No, we're very easy to find. You can start at turmeric for Instagram. It's turmeric tequila. We're at turmericandtequila.com. My personal Instagram and my business KO Alliance. You can find all the links from there, koalliance.com. And one links to everything else. So if you find one, you can find me. I'm accessible. If you have questions, comments, feedback, we are open and out here. We're here for our entire community, but particularly our Colorado entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.